I was asked to talk about baggage. I have a lot of history of baggage. No. We've all got a bit of baggage associated with us. And in our teaching of Māori health, we see a lot of baggage come out. So my job is to share some of that with you. Getting a lot of this stuff from our teaching and our experience sort of on the ground. So you've heard all the theory behind what we're trying to do in Māori health, but what happens when you're actually out there? And this is some of the things that happen. And this is just within our Māori Health Intensive. That's one of those dedicated teaching spaces that Reese was talking about. We get 4 days in Year 2, and it's a combination of Year 2 medicine, nursing and pharmacy students. So interprofessional education. That's 4 days for the whole year. It's all run one day after the other. And in terms of where it's placed, according to the students, it's in their holiday. Yeah. Hence, we've got a slide on baggage. The focus is on Māori health and everything you've just heard about. It's compulsory attendance, so that's pretty much it. So we have no other way to really assess other than their attendance in terms of having the assessment mean anything. But there is some other assessment throughout the week. They have to put together an e-poster. They work in small groups of a mixture of nursing, medical and pharmacy students, and we're teaching them Māori health. Those are the numbers. That's my first baggage I'm going to raise. Who else has to teach to 500? No. It is a very, very large cohort to try and teach to, and when you're trying to teach Māori health, that's one of our first challenges, and those numbers have been increasing over the years. So we'll talk around some of that a bit later and what that means. So I'm just going to go through actual feedback from students on the evaluation forms and what we actually get year by year. The first baggage, number one, is, it's a shame it's in the holidays. So this is an example for us because actually they're told it's not their holidays. The programs try and tell them in advance that it's not their holidays. They're now health professional students. In fourth year they may be required to start in February, January, whenever. But the basic understanding from their perspective in Year 2 is it's in their holidays, in their mid-semester break. There is a hidden curriculum behind that in terms of to get any space in the curriculum, that is the space that we got given. We wouldn't have that space if we didn't have it, so the hidden message potentially is it valued? Why is it not intensively, purposely placed somewhere else in the curriculum where other teaching happens? But this is some of the stuff we can talk around. It's not their holidays, and so what we end up having are students that come to us to learn Māori health and they're already in bad buzz land. They're already pissed off that it's in their holidays. Baggage number 2, this is really interesting, is that we have over recent years, not last year, had it at Tāmaki campus, and the number of complaints that we would get about it being at Tāmaki campus, too hard to get to, really far, far away from the centre of the universe. And I think that's really interesting because it may reflect that their Year 2 status and their lack of being exposed to having to travel to hospital sites around Auckland, which they will have to take for granted in the very near future. But yeah, it is an issue that does come up. And so again, they come with a level of negativity about having to catch a bus or pay for petrol. I hope you fellas have these problems too in your own teaching. This one you probably don't have, and that's please provide hāngi and food. Now, that's real, and that's on a number of the evaluations. So is it unrealistic expectations? Is anyone else required to provide kai? But it's Māori, so has to have food because we love our family. It's an interesting one that I'm raising because is it unrealistic, is it unfair, or is it an opportunity? And I'll talk to you around how we've used it in our response to some of the baggage. The fourth one was, it wasn't as bad as I expected. That was actually quite fun, Māori health teaching. And in that statement, the flip side of that is they are coming with the expectation that it will be crap, that they won't enjoy it, that it's going to be painful. And so again, when you teach endocrinology or clinical methods, do you have that issue with students that arrive already thinking that it's going to be, not good? So they do come again with they're so negative, and it does reflect probably the bias in broader society around anything Māori actually. You just have to turn the television on and watch Paul Henry or any other unnamed program, and you will see quite a lot of negativity, implicit and explicit in there. But what does actually happen is the perception changes, and so they come in thinking it's going to be boring, a waste of time, but they do find it enjoyable, informative, useful, and one of the aspects about the IP is that they get to meet others that they wouldn't nearly meet. Doctors and nurses and pharmacists are engaging with each other. So yeah, we have that baggage to deal with as well. And we've already talked a little bit about this, but this does come up. What about Asian Health Week? What about Pacific Health Week? Why is it always focused on the Maoris? So the focus on Indigenous rights is very unfamiliar for a number of our students, so we have to go through some of that. And again, I think just to support what Reece said, it's definitely not either or. It should be and we would support teaching properly around Asian health and Pacific health, but obviously Indigenous health has its own context and its own Indigenous rights perspective on which to teach it. And again, we've touched on this, so why can't we have more about Māori culture? We would like to learn more Māori, and why don't you tell us about your customs? And it's quite an interesting one, because it is hard to teach people about Māori health inequities when they don't even know what being Māori means. Or they don't even know what it is, why are Māori different in any way. So, and again, it's a bit what Anna said around never having met a Māori before. Well, we have a large number of students like that in this teaching. So they often also want the nice content, not the critiquing content. So much more, they'd rather learn the waiata than wonder why they only hear music in English, those sort of things. There's less desire for that personal critique, yeah, and definitely much more of a focus on cultural competency than culture safety. And the last favourite one is the teachers are biased. And I protest, no. We're very open to critiquing ourselves. But this actually often comes up in the teaching of history. So the teaching of the story of Ngāti Whātua. And that story, we've taken that from the Waitangi Tribunal report, or very esteemed, learned experts of history. We didn't make it up. We haven't just told the story from our perspective. It's a perspective that's now accepted from the Waitangi Tribunal. And yet, that will still be questioned by a number of the students. So, yeah, we're seen as dodgy educators to start with, so we're not experts. We're not often, even our own MAPA students don't actually understand that we're actually medically trained, so they're like, what? So that level of bias, prejudice, stereotype comes out when we teach, so we have a big issue there. Nothing to do with our teaching quality. Yeah. So I think, again, that does reflect broader societal bias, and I think this point's quite important, that when we're thinking about the students and the baggage they come with, I don't really want to be judging them on that. Some of it's outside of their control. So we're just going to tell you a few things that we've done to try and overcome that baggage. This is what the timetable now looks like, and there used to be quite a bit of free time on the Wednesday and Thursday of the program where we sort of left them to themselves. And one of the first things we had to do was really look at our curriculum and just see how constructively aligned it was, and I'll get into that a bit later. But just to give you a feel, it's very comprehensive. We take the 500 or so students and break them down into small groups now for small group work, which we can talk around the challenges of that. We do the Ngāti Whātua case study, which has been designed in conjunction with Ngāti Whātua, where we tell their story with the Day 507 video and other multimedia that were created just for that, and that about a third of the class will be in tears at the end of that session, and that helps us set the scene. We then have to take them through some basics, and then we've created a number of workshops. And we have to personally, each team would have 2 people doing a workshop, repeat that workshop 8 times throughout the day, so that we can get small group teaching and learning that's meaningful in the teaching of this Māori health. Then Paul Pups and Reece have to take the Treaty of Waitangi seminar. Yay, everyone's looking forward to that. And the students have a Māori intervention seminar. They want to hear something positive, because a lot of what we talk about in Māori health seems to be negative. So we're trying to find ways in which they can get access to some positive stories, and we've been focusing on mana kids and the interventions that's been happening in South Auckland to affect rheumatic fever. We've now added in some more IP sessions, and there's small group work with peer facilitators and student facilitators, as well as they have a pōwhiri experience where they go to Waipapa Marae. Then they have to prepare an e-poster together in their group, so they have to do some work together, and then we all have to sit and listen to every presentation of those e-posters in hapu groups, and then we come together as an iwi and tātou all together, and we give them a hangi on that last day. And I'll talk around that. Okay, so one of the solutions, number 1, is just try and remove as many negatives as possible. Rather than go, oh, those bloody students, just try and go, okay, let's move it from Tāmaki to city. We managed to achieve that. That's harder said than done, just mostly on the timetable restrictions. We do actually provide a hangi now, and we've done that for 2 years. What we used to do at the marae trip used to be on the first day and they got a morning tea. It actually ended up being as expensive as providing a hangi on the last day. So it's sort of cost neutral. What it does do is actually, it's responded to the students' requests, so that's always a good thing. It creates more of a celebratory type atmosphere with the students on the last day, so there's a bit of more positive tone to Māori Health. And I will take whatever I can get to get some people smiling when it comes to Māori Health teaching. We also give them kapahaka, which helps deal with that wanting cultural nice stuff. And it's lovely to hear. And and there's nothing that's reflecting Reese's curriculum so far. No. And we also try and ask the programs to help us remove that misconception about it being a holiday. But yeah, that's a difficult one. The next solution for us is just to try and use best practice teaching and learning. So when you've got so much negativity and sort of baggage that comes along with it, you've got to counter it with just doing really good teaching and learning. So for us, that is a commitment to small group work, where it's interactive for the students. The Ngāti Whātua case study uses multimedia, multiple formats, in a large lecture theatre with all of them, but it works really well. So you can actually take this type of environment, which is incredibly exciting, I can see you all excited, and we can do something with it. And also try and be evidence-based and use the evaluation and respond to it. But not the evaluation that has a very anatomically correct penis drawn on it that went to PUPS one year. That one we try and avoid. So we do get some scary evaluation. The third solution is really just try and create some safe learning spaces. And some of the tools we definitely do use is humour and just try and keep it light and make it fun for the students. So in one of the racism privilege workshop, who wants to do that workshop? Me and Rochelle do. We get them with aeroplanes and they're doing stuff, and also we play a bit of a video. So non-judgmental, the use of peer facilitators is really helpful and engaging and interactive. So this is how we start off their learning on racism and privilege. Hopefully this will work.
Government's been talking a lot lately about changing the Racial Discrimination Act, right? Basically to make it easier to publish hate speech. And our Attorney General, George Brandis, was on TV in the middle of this whole thing, and he was talking about freedom of speech. Because whenever anyone says racism, white people say freedom of speech. And George Brandis thought it was really important at this point to say publicly that people in this country have a right to be bigots, yeah? And a lot of people got really upset, but I understood where he's coming from, because I'm an artist, right? I believe in freedom of speech, and I believe freedom of speech needs to be protected, but more importantly, I know freedom of speech needs to be defended for people who don't have a voice. And guys, I think we can all agree, if there's a group of people in this country that don't have a voice, it's bigots, right? Like, bigots and racists, because where do you hear the views of bigots and racists? Like, who speaks for bigots and racists? Who represents racists in this country? Really, who represents racists? Besides the government, besides the government and a few major national news outlets, who represents racists? I was watching the news the other day, I had to switch it off. I was shocked. I was like, that news report was only like 90% racist. Like, when are we gonna stop silencing racists? And when are we gonna stop oppressing white people in general? When? And I know that's quite controversial for me to say, because I'm not white, so not my struggle. But,
yeah, it just helps to break down the drama of them coming into a workshop on racism and privilege, to be honest. And yeah, it sort of works. Hopefully we don't offend anyone with it. It is just a big joke. So yeah, that's some of the things we do. We've done constructive alignment. I won't go too much into that, but we had a lot of learning objectives that Reese went through, and then where were we actually teaching them? So what were the activities we were doing to help the students learn that? And so we really aligned that up a lot more. We've also created a course builder site to help reinforce that. Another solution is to try and control the hidden curriculum. So getting faculty buy-in, which, to be fair, I think we have really good buy-in and support from the faculty, and on mihi to all the people and the evil powers of control that are with us today. Actually, the faculty is really awesome to get behind this kaupapa. And also just having the program staff come and be visible, present, during MHI is really, really important because it shows the students implicitly that the programs are behind Māori Health intensive. And just try and make our educator expertise explicit so there's no question around that. We've also used interprofessionalism. It's been interesting. It's sort of been not dumped. There's been a whole history behind that, and I think it's been really valuable. But we're not the interprofessional experts. We're the Māori Health experts, and we're having to try and marry up both. But we're trying to do that more explicitly now in the curriculum. Hopefully it's a win-win, because the students enjoy working with the other students, and that's one of the major comments. So then they sort of infect them and they're enjoying Māori Health of that. And there's just whakawhanaungatanga, it's spelled badly. This is just some of the evaluation. I don't look at it too hard out, but just the fact that when you're teaching racism and privilege, which are actually some of the hardest topics, it comes out as one of the top workshops. I'm not saying that just because I do it. I think it's because of the fun humour thing and they're not expecting it, and for some of the students it can be a bit of a shift. But again, some of those other workshops, and the ones that are probably rated the lowest are the ones that are still back in the larger lecture theatre traditional style. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. Just real quickly in terms of discussion, I would say expect an Indigenous backlash when working with the baggage, so a backlash to being Indigenous content. I think it's been helpful for us to depersonalise the issues because it can be quite draining as educators to get that negative feedback. We've also had to accept we won't change everyone, but there is a tension for us around trying to focus on those ones that, the lowest common denominator, ones that could be pushed a bit further, and that's hard. And we've tried to remove as many barriers. I think the discussion that hopefully will come out is what's the role of something intensive like 4 days and then we don't see them again in medicine, for example, until year 6. Year 4. So to sort of nearly a 2-year gap. How can we actually contribute to their learning in that context? So that's why we need all of you. It's a bit othering in that regard too, because there's this Māori Health and that's it. It's quite resource intensive for us to do this well, but it would be difficult to do it any other way in terms of lowering the quality. The numbers are just ridiculous. So actually there isn't the space to do small group best practice teaching and learning in this university. We have to go to the Pullum and pay thousands of dollars and things like that, so because we just don't have the space. And I feel quite worried about our Māori and our Pacific students in and amongst all this. We actually have evidence from them that they find when they're experiencing Māori Health intensive or any teaching on Māori Health that it's unsafe. They get a lot of racist comments. And we're not focused on them really during this intensive, so how could we fix that? And again, these are wider issues, not just the student issues. And finally, I guess the thing is for us all to think about what your own baggage is when you're either teaching it or hearing about it or just being a clinician. And that's me. Kia ora.
It was clear to me, but was there any questions of clarification for Elena? Oh, hang on, I have to find the microphone there.
Tēnā koe, thank you very much for that. I was just wondering about the small groups, what sort of size you're aiming for, what sort of size you're working at now, because 500 is a lot, so
yeah,
breaking that down.
So we'd have in each workshop there's about 40 to 50, and they would be broken into about 5 groups of 10 or so, or 8 to 10. And then we use those groups within those workshops.